For centuries, humans have dreamt of conquering space and soaring through the heavens. And for centuries, so it has remained, just a dream. But in the 20th century, the phenomenal growth of science and technology created an unprecedented opportunity to make these dreams come true. And they did come true, here in the steppes of Kazakhstan, when a train from the Industrial Revolution pushed its successor to its launch pad, a new revolution began. The torch had been passed on. In the future, people will look back on this day as the beginning of a new era. The day mankind learned how to leave the Earth. October the 4th, 1957. The dawn of the space age. The Soviet Union launched an object named Sputnik, higher and faster than anything else before. It reached such a tremendous speed that the Earth curved away before gravity could pull it back to the ground. Free-falling around the Earth without any rocket power made Sputnik into Earth's first artificial satellite. Radio amateurs around the world could pick up its signal. Besides beeping, it didn't do much. The main thing Sputnik was saying to the world was, "I'm here." Many people remember seeing Sputnik pass through the night sky, even though what they really saw was one of its much larger rocket stages trailing along behind. Sputnik beeping at the world was a wake-up call for the United States. The Soviet Union had taken a technological leap ahead. This blow to American national pride led to the creation of NASA, a government organization with a mission to get an American in space as soon as possible. The space race was born. Just 1 month later, the Soviets struck again when they launched another Sputnik. Sputnik 2 was 6 times heavier and had a passenger on board, a dog named Laika. Laika was the first living creature to orbit the Earth. Without an Earth re-entry system, however, she was doomed. Laika only survived several hours in space and died of heat exhaustion. Following missions returned space dogs safely to Earth, paving the way for the first manned spaceflight. Little was known of the effects of weightlessness on the human brain. Therefore, a completely automatic capsule was designed, the Vostok, meaning east. Surprising the world, on April the 12th, 1961, Vostok 1 carried a man into space. It was the first time anyone had journeyed beyond the Earth's atmosphere and the first time anyone had gone into orbit. The Soviet Union had won the race to space.
Полет продолжается хорошо. Наблюдаю Землю. Видимость хорошая. Различить можно все. Некоторое пространство покрыто кучевой облачностью. Полет продолжаю. Все нормально.
The cosmonaut inside the Vostok, famous for his smile, was Yuri Alexeyevich Gagarin.
Все работает отлично. Все отлично работает. Идем дальше. Заря один. Вас слышу очень слабо. Самочувствие хорошее. Настроение бодрое. Продолжаю полет. Все идет хорошо. Машина работает нормально. Корабль функционирует нормально. Вижу Землю через иллюминатор взора. Заря 3. Какие параметры моей траектории? Привет, блондину!
Я чувствую себя великолепно. Очень хорошо.
Продолжаю полет. Я над Америкой. Передал телеграфный сигнал. Слышу вас хорошо. Полет идет по плану.
While traveling faster than a bullet, Yuri's thoughts were with his mother. What would she say when she heard that her son was part of the Soviet space program? While still in space, Yuri got promoted from lieutenant to major. The Soviet press agency TASS triumphantly announced the news of Major Yuri Gagarin on the radio, and he became an instant worldwide celebrity. The flight's only mishap happened right at the end. The Vostok's retro rocket system had trouble separating from the capsule, causing a violent tumble and nearly killing Gagarin. His ejection from the capsule by parachute was kept a secret.
Привет! Я друг, я советский гражданин.
By keeping it a secret, the flight could now qualify as an official space record. After Gagarin's success, many more spaceflight records were set with the Vostok and the slightly modified Voshod capsule. On March the 18th, 1965, the Soviet Union pulled off yet another first. An ingenious inflatable airlock allowed cosmonaut Alexei Leonov to leave his Voshod capsule and become the first person ever to walk in space.
Алмаз-2. Мы вас видим очень хорошо. Пора начинать.
Ну что ж, Земля и в самом деле круглая.
after 12 minutes, it all went horribly wrong.
Время возвращаться внутрь.
Alexei was exhausted, and his spacesuit had ballooned in the vacuum of space. He couldn't re-enter. Only by venting some air through a valve on the chute was he able to save his life.
Что ты делаешь? Gemini 8, you're a go for docking.
From 1957 till 1965, the Soviets had almost always beaten their American counterparts in all space achievements, sometimes by only a few months. But that was about to change with the brand new Gemini program. Earlier in 1961, US President John F. Kennedy had announced a bold challenge to land a man on the moon before the end of the decade. Gemini was the confidence builder necessary to master all the skills that would be crucial for a successful lunar mission. One of those skills was rendezvous and docking with other spacecraft. Gemini 8 Commander Neil Armstrong and astronaut Dave Scott set out for the first docking in space with an unmanned rocket stage, the Agena.
We are docked. No noticeable oscillations. Very smooth.
Finally, the Americans had a first in manned spaceflight. Immediately after docking, some of the most hair-raising moments in space history would unfold. The combined spacecraft started to roll. Neil Armstrong tried to correct manually by using thrusters, but every time he let go of the controls, the roll would start again and keep accelerating. Unknown to Armstrong and Scott, the problem was within the Gemini spacecraft, a jammed orbital thruster. Convinced the problem was within the Agena, they undocked.
We have serious problems. We're tumbling and have separated. We're rolling up. We can't turn anything off.
Now, as a much lighter spacecraft, the effect of the firing thruster virtually doubled. On the verge of losing consciousness, Armstrong activated the re-entry jets and shut off the orbital thrusters. The crew regained control, but the mission had to be aborted. In absolute secrecy, the Soviets too were working on their own moonshot with the giant N1 launcher. A complex design with 30 engines on its first stage that all had to work flawlessly and in synchronization. Cosmonaut Alexei Leonov was the prime candidate to fly around the moon, or perhaps even become the first man to walk on the moon. Then, unexpectedly, the Soviets' chief designer, Sergei Korolev, died. This marked a turning point in the already underfunded Soviet space program. Testing of the different stages of the N1 started in 1968, followed by 4 full-scale unmanned launches. Find out about the N1 lunar program until the demise of the Soviet Union. The American lunar program had its hopes based on the mighty Saturn V rocket from the hand of designer Wernher von Braun. Fearing an imminent flight around the moon by the Soviets in 1968, the Americans took a bold decision. With no lunar module available yet to test in space, the first manned launch of the Saturn V would carry the Apollo 8 capsule to the moon and achieve lunar orbit. The Apollo 8 crew members were Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and Bill Anders. They would soon become the first humans to leave Earth orbit and actually go to another destination in space. It was a mission loaded with risks, as they only had a single engine to get in and out of lunar orbit.
Minus 1 minute. Minus 50 seconds. Minus 40.
S1C pre-press complete, Frank.
Roger, you're all good. Minus 30 seconds. Speed.
Next word.
Minus 20 seconds.
Minus 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9. We have ignition sequence start. The engines are on.
All engines running. Launch commit.
3.
Apollo 8 Houston, you look good for staging.
S1C cutout.
Roger.
S2 ignition.
Roger, S2. Capcom, can you confirm tower jet? That's affirmative, he did. Copy, fighter. You know, first stage was very smooth, and this one is smoother. Apollo 8, you are go for TLI, over. Ignition. Roger, ignition. Apollo 8 Houston, you're looking good here, right down the center line. Roger, Apollo 8. Okay, we got Zico right on the money.
With the last engine burn, the translunar insertion, Apollo 8 coasted to the moon. The United States had made a major advance in the race to the moon.
Welcome to the moon, Houston. Apollo 8 Houston, 1 minute to LOS, all systems go. This is a safe journey, guys. See you on the other side.
Once Apollo 8 had arrived behind the moon, it had to fire its single engine to be inserted into lunar orbit. The astronauts were now completely isolated from the Earth. On Christmas Eve, hundreds of millions of people watched the live broadcast from the moon. Then, the crew of Apollo 8 did the unthinkable. They read from the book of Genesis.
We are now approaching lunar Earthrise, and for all the people back on Earth, the crew of Apollo 8 has a message that we without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth.
It was during this flight, in a back room at the Mission Control Center in Houston, that Neil Armstrong got word that he would command the first mission to land a man on the moon 7 months later, Apollo 11.
Apollo 11, Houston, we are go for undocking, over.
On July the 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin commenced their descent to the lunar surface, while Michael Collins remained in the command module. The astronauts gave themselves only a 50% chance of mission success. This was to be the most nail-biting descent of all lunar missions.
Program alarm. It's 1202. We're going that flight. We're going that alarm. Give us a reading on the 1202 program alarm. Roger, we got you. We're going that alarm.
Okay, all flight controllers, go for landing. Retro.
Go.
Fido.
Go.
Guidance.
Go.
Control.
Go.
Telcom.
Go.
GNC.
Go.
Ecom.
Go.
Surgeon.
Go.
Capcom, we're go for landing.
Pretty rocky area.
Computer overload alarms caused the Eagle to overshoot its original landing site in the Sea of Tranquility.
60 seconds.
Flying above boulders as big as houses and running low on fuel, Neil took manual control and searched for a spot to land.
Down 2.5.
Flying with only seconds of landing fuel left was beyond anything they had trained for.
20 feet down, 2.5. Picking up some dust. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Big shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward, drift to the right hole. 1.5. 30 seconds. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot. Okay, we're going to be busy for a minute. Okay, Houston, I'm on the porch. Did you get the base down? I'm going to pull it down. Houston, the Mesa came down. All right. Houston, Roger. We copy, and we're standing by for your 2GV. Roger, TV circuit breakers in. And we're getting a picture on the TV. You got a good picture, huh? Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now. Okay, I just checked getting back up to that first step, but it's adequate to get back up. Roger, we copy. It's a pretty good little jump. I'm at the foot of the ladder. The LEM footbeds are only depressed in the surface about 1 or 2 inches. I'm going to step off the LEM now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Neil, this is Houston. Did you copy about the contingency sample, over? Okay, going to get the contingency sample there in here. I'll try to get a rock in here. Beautiful view. Isn't that something? Magnificent sight out here.
Buzz joined Neil on the surface about 20 minutes later.
Magnificent desolation.
camera for a minute, please. Neil and Buzz, the President of the United States is in his office now and would like to say a few words to you. Over.
That would be an honor. Hello, Neil and Buzz. I'm talking to you by telephone from the Oval Room at the White House. And this certainly has to be the most historic telephone call ever made. Because of what you have done, the heavens have become a part of man's world. For one priceless moment in the whole history of man, all the people on this earth are truly one. One in their pride in what you have done, and one in our prayers that you will return safely to Earth.
While Neil and Buzz were on the moon, there was a Soviet visitor nearby. The unmanned Luna 15 was the Soviet Union's last-minute attempt to return lunar samples to the Earth before the Americans did. If successful, the samples would arrive on Earth hours before the return of Apollo 11. Five more successful lunar missions succeeded Apollo 11. Just 4 months later, Apollo 12 made a precision landing on the moon.
You know what I feel like now? You ever see those pictures of giraffes running in slow motion? That's exactly what I feel like.
Say, would you giraffes give us some comment on your boot penetration as you move across there, what you're doing now and what you had there back there at Sharp Crater?
The astronauts visited Surveyor 3, a robotic lander that had landed several years earlier.
Okay, we're moving forward, Joe.
Roger.
From Apollo 15 onwards, walking turned into driving. These extended missions carried a foldable rover, a $38 million dream machine. Commander Dave Scott was the first to drive it on the moon.
I'm glad they got this great suspension system on this thing. Boy. Oh, look at the mountains today, Jim, when they're all sunlit. Isn't that beautiful? Really is. By golly, that's just super. You know, unreal. Ooh, hang on. This is really a rock and roll ride, isn't it?
The Earth-controlled TV camera on the rover allowed television viewers to feel like the third astronaut on the moon. Dave Scott performed a popular scientific experiment.
Well, in my left hand I have a feather, in my right hand a hammer. And I guess one of the reasons we got here today was because of a gentleman named Galileo a long time ago who made a rather significant discovery about falling objects in gravity fields. And we thought that where would be a better place to confirm his findings than on the moon. And so we thought we'd try it here for you. And I'll drop the two of them here, and hopefully they'll hit the ground at the same time. How about that? Mr. Galileo was correct. 3, 2, 1, ignition. Fire away, Houston.
In December 1972, Apollo 17 ended the greatest exploration in human history. The space race and race to the moon were over. In the remaining 1970s, the manned space program no longer had a clear destination. It became the decade of the unmanned robotic explorers. Many destinations in space are ideally suited for the use of unmanned spacecraft, due to their lower costs and lower risk factors. The Soviet Union succeeded in landing Venera 9 on Venus in 1975. In the meantime, the Americans had turned their attention to Mars and landed Vikings 1 and 2 there in 1976. The Vikings beamed back stunning images of the surface of the planet. Then a robotic arm dug up samples of the Martian soil. Inside the Vikings, biological experiments were carried out, designed to detect life in the soil samples. The results were initially positive, but on further analysis, most scientists became convinced that these results were probably caused by a non-biological chemical reaction. However, the existence of life on Mars is still under debate and is a driving force for getting funding for new missions. The further our interplanetary spacecraft travel from Earth, the harder it gets to listen to their whispering signals. What use would they be to us if we couldn't communicate with them anymore? Therefore, extraordinary demands are being placed on ground-based radio antennae. Due to the rotation of the Earth, each radio antenna can only keep in touch with a spacecraft for a portion of the day. To solve this problem, deep space networks are used. Radio antennae placed strategically around the world are connected with each other. Together, they can talk and listen to our interplanetary spacecraft all day long. Probably the most famous of all interplanetary spacecraft are the Voyagers. Voyager 1 and 2 took us to new heights and explored all the outer gas giants of our solar system and their moons. Never before were so many new horizons discovered and revealed to us as by these voyages. They showed us our home, our solar system, and our place in the universe for the first time. Having missed out on being the first on the moon, the Soviet Union focused on building stations in space. They were first again with the Soyuz space station, but the most successful of all was their Mir space station, allowing nearly 10 years of continuous human presence in space.
T-minus 20 seconds and counting.
After Apollo, NASA's manned space program focused on the reusable Space Shuttle, the most complex machine ever built. The Space Shuttle looks like a large flying pickup truck that lands as a glider at the end of its mission. It has deployed and fixed satellites, operated as a self-launching space station, and delivered entire modules to permanent space stations.
We have booster ignition and liftoff.
Roll program.
Houston's now controlling.
Lights will guide you home and ignite your bones, and I will try to fix you.
The dawn of the space age started with two nations who watched each other's achievements with a combination of envy and admiration. The admiration led to cooperation. At the dawn of the 21st century, we are marking the permanent human presence in space with the International Space Station. At least 16 countries are involved in the biggest ever project of international cooperation. The International Space Station serves as a research facility orbiting the Earth every 92 minutes. Its main use is research under microgravity, commonly known as weightlessness. This can lead to new discoveries in medicine, materials and science, which people all over the world could benefit from. The space station also provides us with more insight on the effects of long-duration stays in space on the human body. This experience will be invaluable for future human exploration of the solar system. Yet changing politics and the Space Shuttle Columbia tragedy delayed the construction of the International Space Station. It might require a little more patience before we can steer back to a destination-oriented space program, which allows humans to leave low Earth orbit once again. But there is a new star on the horizon, not funded by any government, but by the biggest industry in the world: tourism. In 2004, Spaceship One captured the Ansari X Prize, a prize aimed at spurring development of low-cost spaceflight for us all. Now the common man can become a space tourist. The score is Spaceship One, Government Zero. At some point in time, just watching the planets on our computer screens will not be enough. Instead of gazing in awe at what our ancestors achieved, we could become the first life form that lives on more than one planet. It can be done right now. We just need to be willing to invest in these new worlds, dare to take risks again, and most of all, we just need to make the bold decision to live the dream and go.
I want to go in a spaceship. I want to throw M&Ms in the air. I want to go in a spaceship. Spaceship One, won't you please take me there? I want to fly in a spaceship. I want to make fuzzy lines in the air. I want to go in a spaceship. Spaceship One, won't you please take me there? Spaceship One, won't you please take me there?
I saw my life. I like this film, very correct.